Hello, this is One Mana Left, and this is an update video to the Gemling Int Stack Mana Stacker. My character has, if we round to the nearest 1,000, I have 2,000 Int. That's how I like to think of it, at least. But that's giving me 18.4k mana. And I've recently got a big upgrade. Don't pay attention to the spirit. I'm just testing temp chains. But 160 spirit, because I like to map with blink, or for bossing, conduit. But in my current gear, that doesn't really matter. Things just kind of die to spark instantly. But yeah, I'm gonna go over some changes that happened in the 1.1 patch notes. For the most part, everyone was thinking the patch was gonna be like the nerf patch, and everything was gonna get nuked from orbit. And I kept saying I don't think so, because they're only going to be back for 4 days and just spend most of that time processing what the hell happened. So I was pretty smug that there was not going to be nerfs, and there was not. In fact, there was actually slight buffs. But I'll go over some of the changes. A couple support gem interactions changed, like considered casting no longer works on conduit. But, like, you can switch gems now, so I can put a 2% mana gem in my helmet now, because every idiot that sells mana items puts the percent ES gem in, because then it sells better, because it's got more ES for the search. And that's like 100 lower mana than if they just put a mana gem in for this build. So that was actually a buff that we can switch to mana gems now. And they fixed a couple bug things. For example, they fixed the fact that this mental toughness did not work before. I've not pathed back to this yet, I might later, but basically the interaction with CI and Mind Over Matter considered you on low mana because you had 0 energy shield for some reason. And that didn't work before, but it does work now, so especially if you're under geared and don't have the mana flask, this is a good point to take. I think they've maybe fixed mana recovery rate too, but I have not tested this yet. But let's just get into a demo. If you haven't seen the build, people say Simulacrum's the hardest content in the game. Well, this is Simulacrum 4. Let's test that theory. Let's see, is Simulacrum 4 difficult? Well, I'm on wave 13 right now. Waves 13, 14, and 15 each spawn 2 bosses. If you go by the frame by frame there, you might see the 2 bosses. But, yeah, everyone says this content's hard, and turns out it's not spin to win, it's just spark to win, you know? It's pretty straightforward. So I skipped the boring waves. I figured I'd just start on wave 13 just to show you just the acclaimed hardest content in the game versus me pressing my left mouse button as hard as I can. But, I mean, okay, I have 378 tooltip right now. I did just do a ring swap that I haven't fixed yet, because I need to put cast speed on this ring, because I'm way over on lightning res now. That'll gain me like 20% more damage. That'll put me at like 450 then. But I just made a big swap, because you'll see the spirit here. I swapped to different Against the Darkness to add Temp Chain's Blasphemy, but like, that's not really needed for the build at all. I've only had that for 45 minutes. But I'm in the middle of a big swap, so all my gear's screwed up right now. But, I'll talk over how I've progressed the endgame setup. So all the really sweaty people watching can, you know, get that good info. Then I'll kind of go over again kind of the more generic changes since the patch. My new gem links. I might... Okay, to be fair, I have been unlucky on this, but the last one did give me a flask. So, recently I can't complain, but overall I still can. But, yeah, let's go over some things then. I'll do the generic stuff first. So right now, on my Spark, the front 3 are pretty much locked in place. You're going to do faster proj and ink duration. That's like a given. I think faster casting is also just a given. It just feels nicer. I'm actually using inspiration now. This is actually, I think, a good support because a lot of the best like 6th links aren't that good. And there's actually 2 arguments for this. One is you're really low gear and the mana sustain with no flask is hard on bosses, in which case this is a really good gem to have. The other case is that you're like really, really high gear, and you get to the point where I did, where you drop Overshock because you have so much shock effect on your jewels that it's actually over the cap of 100%. And then you instead switch to Inspiration. And then you switch your Ascendancy from the 30% cost to the +1 gems. Which, when you add in things like Blasphemy, Temp Chains, it scales Blink level, Flame Wall level, all that stuff, Sigil level, Conduit level, Cast on Shock level. It's not all spells, it's all skill. The more layers of gems you add in, the more effect this has, the more synergy you get. So this does start to become like 20% better. And especially when you get the Melting Maelstrom Unique Flask, which is just a 1-button full mana recovery with 9 uses. You don't need this. So swapping in Inspiration ends up just being like 14% less mana spent, because it's 40 instead of 30, which is better. And then you get the plus. So, like, this is, like, the endgame swap. So, like, Inspiration is, like, it's good early. It's good late. Maybe there's a weird period in between where you want to go with this, but still Overshock, because you can't quite kill bosses instantly on Pinnacle 4 with just Spark Conduit in your current gear. But you also don't have the Melting Maelstrom Flask. Maybe there's an in-between point where it makes sense to stay this. But I still use Inspiration for that. I'm going to switch this, actually. The Lightning Mastery, I would still probably keep an Archmage, because my plan is to move Considered Casting in. It just feels a little slower than what I'm used to for cast speed. So my brain hasn't fully adapted to that yet. But what I'm going to do is, I just swapped rings. So I'm going to get cast speed on this ring instead of Lightning Res. And then that change in cast speed plus Considered Casting will basically be the same, if not slightly faster cast speed than I currently have. So that will make the Considered Casting swap feel right, but just be like 40% more damage on the cast then, as opposed to like 12% with Lightning Mastery. So it's like 25% more damage if I do that swap combo, and it'll feel the exact same. On Cast on Shock, they changed Considered Casting to no longer work. If you look here, before, what happened is your this number would change. Funny enough, I know this is not always the case in PoE 1, but for the most part in PoE 2, the tooltip has been accurate as far as if something works or not. Everything I've tested in the game so far, if it changed the tooltip, it did work. I've not seen an exception to that yet. There might be one, but in my testing, that's always been correct so far. But if I switch this out, it's still 148k. Before the patch, that was not the case. Before the patch, it would have been 40% higher. It was like 240 instead. So instead, I'm going to go Ellie Focus, Lightning Conduit, Cast on Shock is like the core 3. I'm still Controlled Destruction. There's an argument to switch this to Spark instead, but then there's not really a good 6th support for Cast on Shock. And then I'm just going with the double energy. I'm going Energy Retention and Energy Gain. Both of these math out to be about 22% more damage when you factor in the energy. So like it's 22% more DPS each. It's not as good as Considered Casting was, so if there was a single nerf in the patch, that was a slight nerf. But if I move Considered Casting back to Spark, it ends up being probably about a net gain, because I was going to try to do that anyways later, once I got enough cast speed. So, those are the Gemlinks right now. I do ignore the Firestorm, I'm not using that. I have Ingenuity on Blink. Flame Wall is really good. This is 72% more damage. This is not good while mapping, because you're never going to Flame Wall while mapping. But if you set it down before a map boss, or a Pinnacle boss, or in the case of Simulacrum, just sit it in the middle the entire time, it's 72% more damage. It's also a good argument for all gems instead of lightning gems, because like my current wand, if I swapped it to +5 lightning instead of +4 all, it would actually be a 9% damage loss with Flame Wall. So it's good for any stationary content like Simulacrum, bossing, and Pinnacles, whatever. Shield Charge, Martial Tempo, no brainer. I added the Blasphemy setup. This is like a really endgame swap. Don't worry about this. I've had this on for 40 minutes. but I have like a 36% temp chains, which is kind of cool. I'll mouse over the gear and jewels real quick, and then I'll finish with this is a very expensive character now. In the first videos I showed, it was cheap-ish and manageable. My first iteration, I spent 45 div plus my Titan's Ingenuity. Now I'm at like 300 or 400. So this what you're seeing on screen is not like starter budget at all. I'm usually really straightforward with that. If you want to see the build on lower budget, watch the first video. This is the third episode. But I've made a couple tree changes. I've added an Eldritch Battery on From Nothing, which saves 6 talent points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I basically use those 6 talent points to pick up a 2 for 7 for 2 more Adorn Jewels. And that was a pretty good swap. I am Adorned, so I have all these Adorn Jewels. They're all pretty good. I have an 89 Adorned right now. I have a Megalomaniac somewhere with... These nodes are nice just because they benefit from Against the Darkness. And then I've also got just int spell damage raw power here. So, pretty good. Like I've said before, you go on left side here before you have Melting Maelstrom. And then when you get Melting Maelstrom, you go right side on the pathing here. But yeah, like, nodes I don't have that I would get if I was like 100, or if I wasn't taking these 2 jewel sockets because I wasn't Adorned, is you can go ahead and pass to Mental Toughness instead, and you can get the 45 duration instead. I'm not actually getting the 45 duration because I have 3 or 4 Adorn Jewels with duration. So like 15 times Adorned times 3 or 4 jewels is like 100%. So I already have like 6-second duration Spark. It actually doesn't really make sense to go for more. But if you're not Adorned, you definitely want to go the 45 duration. It's just too good for Spark. So I would say like that's a no-brainer. You could maybe go for Project Speed if you need filler points. Like maybe you're like 95 or 6 with no Adorned. But I would say priority for non-Adorned swaps is drop these 7 points, grab Mental Toughness, and grab the duration. And then if I drop this, that'd put me at 95. That'd be a 95 tree. That'd be pretty good. Or 96 if I grab the 8 int point instead. If you want to trim points too, you can just trim 3 socket nodes. Like if you're starting off and your jewels aren't good, you just cut off the 3 passive sockets. So that's 9 points right there. That are 12 actually, 12 points that are droppable. Yeah. That's pretty much it for the update. I'll maybe post a POV for this later, but I haven't really played with it in POV. It's really buggy. It doesn't work on Archmage. It doesn't work on a lot of things, so I might delay that. I'll update the mobalytics and maybe add POV a little later. You can't import characters either. You have to manually import items one at a time. So I might wait on the POV. But yeah, I'll update everything, and I'll see you guys.